I'd like to call the Teleco Village Property Owners Association April meeting to order. What I'd like to remind everybody, the way we operate our meetings is that on all the topics that we discuss, we first have discussion among the board, and then I'll call for any questions, comments from anybody that's here present as well. And if you have something to say, please speak into the microphone or one of the two microphones so that the people that are watching online can hear everybody. So with that, we'll get started. We do have a quorum. We have 6 board members here. Steve Schneider is not in attendance. He had knee replacement surgery, if I can say that. So he's...
Oh, there's a HIPAA violation.
Well, I figured he wouldn't mind me saying that. So we do have a quorum. So with that, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from our March meeting?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved in second to approve the minutes from our March meeting. Is there any discussion?
I've got one topic that not specific to these minutes, but in general. Could we not record board questions that aren't answered in the minutes, then get a response to those in the following meeting? Because I think part of it is if we ask a question in a public meeting, I think the homeowners deserve to hear that answer as well if it can't be answered in the meeting.
So, yeah, we certainly can do that. Do you have an example of something that we have left open?
No, I mean, sometimes there's financial questions that can't be answered on the spot. They have to research it. And then I've had multiple people ask, well, what, did you ever get an answer to that question you asked? And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But if it was in the minutes, there would be a record that there was a question asked that couldn't be answered, and that could then be answered in the next public meeting.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the intent. So, yeah, we can, as we review the minutes, we can make sure we have that question in there to be addressed in a subsequent meeting.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, rather than muddy up the minutes, why don't we have the person taking the notes record all the unanswered questions, and then we answer them in the next meeting?
Yeah, that's fine.
It could be either, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way to handle it.
Yeah, I don't want to muddy up the minutes.
We could just be addressed as open items in the following meeting. That's a good idea.
So, Mitzi, I assume that you'll take care of that for us.
We'll ask Karen to do that.
And there's an example of it flowing downhill.
Remember, I am part-time.
So with that, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of approving the March minutes, raise your right hand. 6-0, it's passed. Next item on the list is, last month we talked about the approval authority for Chet. His approval authority is $50,000, but to spend any money out of reserves, it has to be approved by the board. And we had this discussion last week that now that a lot of the bills are being paid, a lot of maintenance is being paid out of reserves. So if we approve the expenditure, he should be able to approve that if it's under $50,000, even if it comes out of reserves. We did not actually vote on it, so thought I'd bring it up this month to address as something to approve by the board. That if it's under $50,000, he has approval authority, even if it comes out of reserves.
And if I may suggest that the stipulation that goes along with that is that for me to approve it, it must be within the budget that has already been approved by the board, and it be under the budgetary number, more or less. Even if it's, $25,000 thing, but it comes back at 30 grand, I still need to take that to the board.
Well, the 10% overrun rule would apply there.
Correct. I just want to be sure that it's understood there's still stipulations. It's not 50 grand either way, yeah.
Now, is this limited to maintenance or even the capital that's coming out?
I believe this is maintenance, because don't we approve all capital items anyway?
Not all.
If it's under 50, you're right, we don't.
I think the general consensus was if it's under 50, then I would approve it. unless it did not meet the categories that we just talked about, then it would have to come back to the board.
So what we've done in the past is those would just come up as informational items in the board meeting.
Correct.
But it does not need to be approved.
Yeah, it wouldn't vanish. It would still have to be reported on. It just wouldn't be a vote
Yes.
or something that you'd have to vote on.
So the motion, I think, would be something to the effect to approve expenditure authority by the CEO up to $50,000, whether or not it's from reserves, and it is not more than 10% over the budget number, and it is in the budget. So that's the motion.
There you go. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second to allow Chet's approval authority of $50,000 apply to all expenditures regardless of whether it's coming out of reserves or not, as long as it's budgeted and it's not over 10% above the budgeted amount. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Is there any comment from the?
Any comment from anybody else? Okay, I figured I was giving them the opportunity. So with that, all in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passed 6-0. It says approve on the next item, it says approve the GAC, the Government Affairs Committee appointment, but those are done, since it's a personnel item, those are done in executive committee, so it's just
Because, why?
It's a personnel item.
it's a personnel item.
Absolutely. And it's a review of a volunteer's application, past history. It's got confidential information on it, or could be. So we do it in executive session, and then we announce it in this, correct?
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Appreciate that. And so we're announcing that we did approve Steve Packwood to be on the Government Affairs Committee, filling an unexpired term ending in 2024. Next item is the CEO report. Chet?
All righty then. I think that some of you may have heard or not heard in the last board meeting that I made a comment about looking at trucks, that I had found that I had asked the question, how many trucks do we own? And the initial answer was, well, we own 87. And as it turns out, we really only own 57. And in the process of doing that, there were several trucks that were still on our insurance that we were not using. So we cleaned all that up, got it down to 57. And in the process of doing that, we came up with, here's why that happened and here's what was lacking. And it actually applied to more than just the trucks. It applied to all assets, everything that we depreciate and keep on the books. And that is, we have to have a process of any time, if I sell furniture, if I sell a vehicle, if we sell anything that is on our list of assets, it has to be documented, when it was sold, why it was being sold, what it was sold for, who it was sold to, blah, 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 in a document which comes from that department to accounting, and then accounting processes that document, and we keep it on record as evidence of where that product went. And which it turns out that pieces of that were already in place, but we needed to connect the dots where it's all the way to the end. So accounting had a role in this, specific departments has roles in this, but now we have it defined where it all flows back to very specific people in accounting for them to be able to track it, so that we will always be able to know how many vehicles we own, and if something changes, that's documented, and we can control our insurance and go back and renegotiate, whatever. And those things as we go forward, which, even though it was a bit painful, was the right thing to do. Also, along with trucks, what came up is that we'd like to have all of our trucks, whether they're golf or public works, identified as our trucks. If I'm paying for them, they need to have identification on them. And so all of our trucks are now being fitted. Some of them are already done. By the end of the week, all of them will be done with stickers on the side that say either, Teleco Works, Teleco Village Public Works or Teleco Village Golf. so that anywhere those trucks go, you will know they're our trucks. If there's a truck pulling up in your neighborhood, you'll know it's a Public Works truck that's pulling up in your neighborhood, not just another white truck. Also, to that end, we have ordered and should have by the end of the week bright yellow vests that across the back says Public Works and on the front says Tellico Village, so that if you see someone walking out across the lawn, you will know that that's an employee of the POA, not just somebody walking across your lawn. And that anytime anybody who works for Public Works is out in the field, so to speak, they have to wear those vests. We'll also have lanyards, we have lanyards for them to be worn that has the picture of them and their card and their identification of who they work for and where they work and all that sort of thing. So it is fair of homeowners to say, you know, we got 1,000 people driving in and out of the community. Who are you and why are you in my yard? And I think this will help negate those concerns by having them well identified in the process. Recently, I took a look at the boat docks and the maintenance of them, and rather belabor all the entertainment that I had doing that, is to say that we are looking at the process of how we maintain our docks, how we do the lease agreements, what's in those lease agreements, and how we maintain them ongoing. One of the things that are a challenge, both for the homeowner, to be fair, both for the boat owner and to the and to us to maintain that, is the issue of boat insurance. Someone can come in and get their lease in January and their boat insurance dies in February. Well, they were accurate when they came in January and said, yes, I have boat insurance, but it died a month later, and we don't have a way of going back to them and saying, hey, we need the new card that says your boat's insured. And the reason that this becomes very necessary is if your boat inadvertently catches on fire and burns down half the dock, and by the way, your neighbor's boat, then we need to know you have insurance. And we need to be sure that we're protecting everybody by you having insurance. So there's a couple things that go along. Anyway, I won't belabor that other than to say we're looking at that entire process and how we maintain our docks and what are the exact duties of the dock captains and all those kinds of things. And the Marine Advisory, I sat with them, and we're going to look at the process together. Tanasi rebuild status, we have gone out with RFPs to architect firms, and we have 3. We had 4, 1 backed out. We have 3 now that will be coming in. We will review them and pick a architect to start the process. And that will probably be done, and we'll probably be able to announce an architect next week. It's gone pretty quickly and pretty easy and straightforward. So that should be get us one step further in the process. I also am looking at, I've decided to start with Public Works, but I'm looking at evaluating Public Works. All next week I will be spending time with them and understanding what they do and why they do it and how they do it and what it is specifically they take care of and don't take care of, and how that applies. So that should be a very interesting study on my part. And I'm looking at a multitude of things. I'm looking at staffing, I'm looking at the projects we do and the projects we don't do, who does what, and evaluating even the vendors that we use. So it should be an interesting task, and the reason I started with Public Works is because they are my largest group of staff members and they are my largest expense. So that's purely the only reason why I started there. So once I get that done, I'll come back and report to the board what I found and where it came out. We are now entering into the second quarter of the year, and I sat with all my directors this week and talked about their capital expenditures, and I made it very clear to them that this year we will not get to October and November and December and still have several $1 million on the books, because either we over budgeted, which is bad, or we didn't get stuff done, which is bad. So either way, whatever we're budgeting for, we need to be doing. And if we aren't going to do it, then we better have really good reasons. Like, number one, best reason so far I've heard is that we ordered something in January and that particular vendor can't deliver it until probably January of next year. Okay, fair enough, that's a good reason. I didn't get the RFP out until end of May, and they won't be able to do the job until next year. Not a good reason. You have to be on top of this. If we're going to say we're going to spend the money and we're going to do these projects, then one, we better need them, and if we don't need them, then don't give them to me in a budget. So we're trying to find some balance in that, and this is the first year that I've been here through the whole process, and so I think that most of the directors are on top of that. They get it, they understand it, and they agree with it. So it wasn't that I was sort of preaching to the choir, but not exactly, because we need to get this stuff done, and we need to be responsible for it. And last but not least, I had a meeting here a few weeks ago it was specifically for people who either are running rentals or own rentals or had an opinion about rentals. And my several takeaways I got from that meeting is that, number one, the rentals feel that they shouldn't be treated any different than any other homeowner. More or less, if we have rules that you have to have your porch painted and your house power washed and all that, it should apply to everybody, not just the rentals. I agree 100%. And if the rentals don't want me in their business, and by the way, I don't want to be in their business. I want nothing to do with it. However, I do need to know who's renting. And I'll give you a couple examples why. One of them is kind of an esoteric thing. I mentioned it in the meeting, is if there's ever an emergency, I need to know who to call. If the house is on fire, the renter's not going to tell me who to call. If they're in the house, I need to know who it is. But there are other reasons too, as an example, which people brought up. Well, I'm over here in a rental and you're dinging me because I didn't get my lawn mowed and the next door neighbor's got bushes everywhere. Well, fair statement. The problem is I need to know that you, as a renter, have agreed with your homeowner to be the one to maintain the exterior of the house. I don't know that. So if I did know that, I could send the homeowner and the renter a letter. Because many of the homes that are being rented here, both long-term and short-term, are being managed by a local real estate person, and that actual homeowner lives somewhere else. They don't even live in this area. When I say not in this area, I mean they're in another state. So to that end, I am looking at, and I'm challenging the ACC to put together some very brief rules about how we should look at permits. Because in my head, any business going on within the community should have to have a permit. Whether it's a renter, whoever, don't care. Business needs a permit. What we charge for that permit and how we manage that, I'm going to charge the ACC to come back in writing with some options. In terms of violations, house needs to be power washed. I left my trash can in the driveway all week long. All those kinds of things that we have. I'm putting, pink flamingos in the front lawn, and I know a lot of you like pink flamingos, but I'm sorry, no egregious doodads in the front lawn. And so, but again, who's doing that? Who's responsible for that? And who's supposed to take care of that? And what do we do if the homeowner goes, I like pink flamingos, I'm not moving them? What's our options? So those are things that the ACC has got to look at and come up with some plans, because we have to have teeth. Being able to tell somebody you can't do this, bad boy, is not teeth. I have to have ways of convincing them to go another way. Now, it doesn't mean we start with that, but it means we get there sooner or later. The last piece that I'm charging them with is violations of ACC. And what that means is, currently, there seems to be a pretty strong policy of it's easier to ask forgiveness than it is to ask permission. And that's got to change. That's not the way we should be running our business. And that's not fair to all the other homeowners who do go through the process correctly. So we're looking at what do we do about that? How do we handle that? And because we are the developers and because we have the ability to change the governing, not the governing documents, what's the name? Protected covenants, thank you. I'll get the right terminology yet. The protected covenants, we can do those and make those changes, but I want those changes to come from the group that has to theoretically enforce them, and that's ACC, and that's homeowners. And so that's where we want to send it to them and have them bring it back to the board in writing. Pat, you had a question.
Yeah, and the ACC, and this question, I already got the answer. Most of us in this room and watching will know the answer, but the ACC is made up of
Homeowners,
property owners, right?
property owners.
Exactly. And there's a representative there from Public Works, and sometimes the attorney shows up for whatever need there is, but it is made up of property owners. So we're not going to the staff, nor are you going to the board and saying, make me some new rules. These are property owners that you're charging because they live here.
And furthermore, it's not my job to make those kinds of rules.
Right.
It's my job to enforce them, unfortunately. So that's why I want to go to the ACC and have them draw that up, because they're the ones who have to defend it and enforce it. Those are all the things I had. Did I miss something that you guys, anything else you wanted me to talk about? Okay. Clubhouse. Gotcha. Temporary clubhouse is just about there. We've got to get the deck in. We've got to get, finish getting the ACC squared away correctly. Air conditioning, I should say. I said ACC. That's great, Jen. The air conditioning. And the decks we had to build, we decided to put the handicap ramp that we'll have to have to the front door, so we'll have steps and then a ramp going down the side to a sidewalk and out to the parking lot. And then on the back side of the building, facing the water, will be a much larger deck for outdoor seating, all those kinds of good things. And so it should be nice, and it should be fairly quickly to wrap this up and get it open. And no, it isn't going to open in August, Bob. We're going to get it open before then. It should be in the next few weeks, actually.
And I have another one too. And just for everybody's information, it came out in the Telegram this week, so if you want to know, it describes that. But this committee started off with staff and Marty and I on this committee, and your directors, and then we started bringing in other people. And just everybody understands there are property owners now on this committee that are representing long-range planning, Public Services Advisory Committee, Golf, and Finance. And I'm not sure if communication is on there yet.
Well, Beth covers that.
Beth covers that, yeah, okay. So just for everybody's clarification, we purposefully selected the people that are actively involved with those communities in that part of the committee anyway.
Yeah, we also have one person that has construction experience.
Yeah, and prior to that, we had a person with a Tellico Village property owner that had architectural experience, right?
Sure,
And
sure.
then-
So we've been kind of changing it up as our needs change. We
Right.
bring in professionals from the village who are there to advise us.
Right.
And by the way, when we say we're bringing in people, these are people who actually are still working. They're not necessarily retired. The architect we brought in is still working. The builder that we brought in, he's about to retire, but he is still currently working, and he builds a lot, large communities and buildings and airports and crazy stuff.
Right.
Last but not least, pardon me, we've been wrestling with the insurance company over the foundation. And I think I mentioned earlier, but I'll mention it again in this board meeting for the record, that we did do a study on the foundation. The foundation was not built to the actual code of the day and to the drawings, nor does it even come close to meeting code today. So we will not be able to build on that. We will have to take it down, and we're going to the insurance to say, yeah, you got to pay us for this. And as I've said in several other meetings, our job, my job, is to be sure that the insurance pays us. Their job is to not pay us. And so it's a rodeo from beginning to end. So we are in the process of that. We've not finished that process yet, but right now that number comes up to be around $700,000. And so in my mind, that's worth fighting for. And we will continue that fight, and as soon as we have better information or more definitive information, I'll let you know. So that hasn't gone away. We're still after it.
Any questions for Chet? Anybody? Okay, with that, we'll move on to the next agenda item, and that's the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee Master Land Use Plan. Looks like Mr. Grollman is gonna,
Where have you been hiding, Ed? I haven't seen you in months.
Oh, playing a lot of golf.
Okay, all right, that's acceptable then.
So, as I spoke, I'm Ed Grauman, I'm a member of the Long Range Planning Committee. Last year, we were tasked with coming up with a master land use plan, which was part of the CCI purchase and stuff. So, can we go to the next slide, please? Oh, I got the clicker? Okay.
I
Great.
guess can I just clarify,
Yes.
Ed, for everybody, that it wasn't just you, but you're also working in conjunction with the POA staff, right?
Yes, we're looking at POA staff, and that'll come up in here too. We work very closely with Beth on all this, and so it's been a joint effort that we came up with this master plan. Okay, so the POA owns over 400 acres in the village. That was kind of a shock when we came through all this. So that includes 200 acres purchased from the CCI. Most individual parcels exceed 4 acres. Apparently, there's been no document that's had all these parcels. One of the things, when we started looking at maps and diagrams for this, we found maps that were on napkins and things of different things. So there's never been any future plan. That's what this is doing. The drawings that exist today are obsolete. I mean, you look at the Kahiti drawings, the Wellness Center drawings, they're very obsolete, and we need to get some new drawings done in the future.
So I'm sorry, was one more clarification.
Okay.
So you said the POA owns 400 acres.
Yes,
All of Tellico Village is like 5,000 acres, right?
yes.
Okay, just
5,000.
to make sure everybody understood that.
Yeah,
too.
and that comes up, and we'll show a breakdown where those acres are here in the plan and everything like that further. So the master use plan was prepared by the LRC to describe the significant POA parcels. As we said, we worked with the management team and Beth. The plan allocates the parcels into 5 general categories: development, commercial, residential, POA use, and recreational. The LRP recommends a future request for the POA land that they go through this plan and be evaluated against this plan. Okay. The methodology we used to came with this, we developed a plan with POA parcels at least 1 acre. However, the plan does not include the golf courses and plotted residential lots. Parcels leased from the TRDA, except those used by the POA for public works. Although the POA will own the TRD land at the end of lease, much of it is wedged between residential lots and our large parcels like our Loudon golf courses. So I know Chet is looking into some of the things with the TRDA. We may revisit that once he gets more clarification on the TRDA lease. And I know there's some limitations on what we can do on that land, so we did not want to include that, categorize things that we may not be incorrect here. Okay?
Sure, and TRDA has been pretty flexible about that. We're looking at ways that we can allow, one of the items that we're addressing, and I won't spend too much time on it, but we're addressing the fact that there are many homeowners, when I say many, I know of 31 specifically right now, that their home, even though it's on the water, is fronted by TRDA land, therefore they're not able to build docks, they're not able to really access the water. And so I'm looking at ways, is it possible for us to lease that land to the homeowner and allow them to put a dock in? And if we lease that land, then of course that money would go directly into the lease that we pay TRDA every year, and would cover those dollars. But in the meantime, it would allow them to have a dock. And there's several gotchas in all this. As an example, if we do that and they're happy with it and they're doing it, if they go to sell their lot, then what do we do? And so, there's the thoughts of, well, they have to sell the new owner on the lease, or they have to take out the dock. So it's one of those things that, yeah, I mean, it's not simple, I guess, is where I'm going with that. So, but we are looking at that and other options too as well.
And that's one of the reasons we've not included in this thing. We realize the complexities of it. The LRPC actually walked a lot of these different properties that are out there to see and get a real, foot-on ground view of what the property is. And we also did a lot of extensive work with the Tennessee Property Viewer and website, which if you are a private homeowner, it's a really good site for you to go look at because you actually see some of your lot lines from that level there too. So, especially if you're on the water. And we work closely with Beth, as said earlier, on the different items here. Categories, recreation, used for, like I said, hiking trails, parks, bike paths, other recreation amenities for the future. Development, possible residential development parcels. These are the larger parcels where a developer would have to put in roads, utilities, and those type of items. Can be used for homes, townhomes, condominiums, but individual resident lots that would be plotted. So there's some smaller lots that when we worked with Beth, that say we could put homes on these lots or sell these, but not plotted yet. So they have to be plotted in order to be part of the development. Okay. POA parcels, public works area, the volunteer fire department area, the yacht club, the POA buildings, all those. That's what stands for the POA areas. Commercials like the square. The square, and maybe other pieces of property that, as we were reviewing this, might be used for commercial development in the future. And then residential parcels. These are small subdivided residential lots needed for no significant infrastructure. So the infrastructure is there. Example is that there's a couple of lots on Kahiti Trail, that we got in the CC idea that could just be considered residential. They have the infrastructure already there. They would just have to hook up into the main infrastructure. Yes?
Just for clarification here, you guys went out and looked at this.
Yep.
To develop a plan for the future.
Yes.
Okay. So this is not saying that we're going to do this.
No.
Okay, and I just want to make it clear because there's sometimes we misinterpret what we either hear or read or whatever. And as an example, you guys came up and said one of the things that people had been pointing out in the village is that we're growing younger because us olders are leaving and selling our house to younger people, which has happened for the last 35 years. But at the same time, you guys saw a desire from those people to have a place to work.
Yep.
And said it would be nice to have a place that they could go sit as a meeting room and do their job. Suddenly that became, you were telling the community we were going to do this.
No, no, it's
that's not what this is it?
No,
Okay.
this is what, we're categorizing what the properties could be used for. The board has the leisure to change and do whatever they want with those properties. There is no timeline on what these going to be used for these properties at any point, what can be developed. So, but we're based on what the input from the management team, Beth, and ours, that this is what we see the property could be used for.
Right. Yeah, and what we did long ago is we tasked you guys as
Yes.
property owners to go look.
Yep.
Because there's a certain amount we've got to sell to get back in the coffers,
Correct.
all right? But then there's a certain amount that we will not sell.
Yep,
And we ask you to go look and pick out what can we do.
exactly. What
Okay.
can we do with those
All right.
pieces of property?
All right.
Exactly.
So in essence, you're zoning, you're working on the zoning map that a city would normally do, right?
Yeah.
This is
Pretty
zone
much, yeah.
commercial.
Pretty much, that's what we're doing. And like I said, the board, this is our advisory, our recommendations. The board can choose to change anything they want. This is not written in stone at this point, okay? And I'll move on to the next one. So,
Well, and
this is,
you just said something and it just hit me too. We're very grateful that you did this.
yes,
And we've done an awful lot of things, we, Tellico Village property owners and board and advisory committee, that you guys have recommended, and you can
Yes.
go back and look at,
Oh.
at meeting rooms and all of this help
the
spot.
video recording, that was one of our recommendations.
Holy cow,
and all
yeah,
that stuff,
this
yeah.
thing, yeah.
This thing, yeah, so it's,
And so all these were recommendations from property owners that you as an advisory committee have been tasked to do. And so I didn't want anybody again to misinterpret, because you said the board is gonna make, we greatly value what you did, because we didn't have to go out and do it.
yep.
Yeah.
No, exactly, but the board has all the final say on everything.
Yeah, okay.
That's why I want to make sure of that, okay? These are the summary of the categories, and this is a nice little graph that shows the people that are worried that we're going to overdevelop Telco Village in this property. Well, 70% of it is is designated for recreation. So you see 17% for development, and those are the 3 large sections that we've come up with that could be developed for housing and hopefully pay back the loan. Okay? And then there's your POA property, a small amount of commercial, and there's a small amount of residential that we still own in there.
Do you have
Any-
the same breakdown for the 200 acres we just bought?
That's all included in that.
Right.
That's all included in that, so. Okay. Any other questions? Move on. Okay. So this is kind of the map that was put out, that's out there. You've been updated. So Beth has worked with us in updating this map, and it is available out there, and with the designations of the different property types. Okay. And these are the development area this is the high level of from the Tennessee viewer of all the different properties that are owned by the POA. So as you can see, Kahiti, we actually own the golf course in Kahiti. A lot of people don't realize that we're leasing the land. The golf courses are on in Loudoun County, but we actually own the one in Kahiti. So that's why you don't see a lot more green in the Loudoun, different areas, because those are TRD. We at one point thought about throwing the TRD land on here, but it would be one big mob of green in a couple of places. You couldn't really tell the distinguish on it, so. Any questions on this? Okay. So these are the 3 properties, that we're talking of for development. Cote, north of Coyote, P38, that's on the far north end there. That has potential for townhomes, village, condos, and multifamily. Kahiti, there's 2 pieces of property. One over by the 7th and 8th holes, which is on the water by the docks, which would be, for more boat slips, parking, and more docked condos and other things in that area too. And then there's the portion by the 16th hole there that we would look at more larger, because of the hills and the dynamics in there, it would have to be larger lots, so like larger lakefront estate type homes. And the master plan also has that for additional boat docks on the other side of Kahiti there. And parking trails and walking trails in that area too we'd be seeking these developers to put in at that point. And that RFP went out before, and Beth is reissuing that RFP, I believe, in the next few weeks, so. Any questions on that? Okay. So wrap up. There was no comprehensive plan before for the 400 acres, so this helps fill that need. We broadly categorize potential uses for the land. The plan does not recommend any particular use for any category, so we're not saying that this piece of land should be a new golf course or that. We're just saying it's recreation. That's to be determined later. The LRPAC is making that future requests be evaluated and checked against the plan, and supply additional justifications, survey renderings, and cost estimates. So changes to the proposed plan should be approved by the LRPC and the Board of Directors here. Approved for funding of property use of land is reserved for the POA Board. And it's not in this presentation, but the board's got all the appendix where we actually broke down each of these pieces of property and what they were. We put in not only Tom, who was not here because he was ill today, did an amazing job of mapping the stuff, both with a satellite rendering and also the Tennessee land viewer in it. So it really shows clarity on what these pieces of properties are. If we had to go through that here now, we'd be here for another 2 hours. So that's why we'd not bring that in now. And now all this will be, once the board approves this, we will post this on Teleco Life and the POA website for people to view the full thing. Any questions?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
So how long have you guys been working on this, guys and ladies?
A little over a year and a half.
Right.
Because we were into it and the CCI purchase happened.
Right.
So that kind of changed and added a bunch of different stuff. And we wanted to make sure that we got input from all the different areas and people, and we got to actually walk and see these properties,
Right.
So, but yeah, so it wasn't just a quick little thing we put together.
Yeah, lots and lots of work.
Lots of hours, lots of discussions, lots of reviews, you know, and in a lot of cases, recommendations came from other committees too. So, we've combined this with, a lot of input from outside the LRPC.
Yeah. Well, thank you all very much, you guys and the people that've been out hoofing this out in the maps and everything, because we've been waiting a long time for this, and it's going to be a good plan going forward, and thank you.
Yeah, it'd be nice to also, if we got some new site maps for like the Wellness Center, the Tokwa, the Yacht Club, Katiti, and something like that in the future, because a lot of those are 30, 40 years old. So that would be a good idea in the future for relevance here from people. Okay?
One very quick question.
Yep.
Thank you. Harry Rucker from the HOA. I appreciate your work that you and your committee did. When does the TRDA lease expire?
2044.
2044? Thank you very much.
Okay. Nothing else? Thank you very much. Oh, oh.
Yeah, hey, that's a lot of work and I appreciate it. Is there a map available now or will there be one so we can look and see, for example, if your home borders what we previously called common property, can we look on a map and see how has that common property been designated?
Well, what I'd recommend you do is go to the Tennessee Property Viewer,
I've done that.
and it will tell you where the common property reviews are based on your own properties.
Yeah, I understand. It
But-
shows where there's lots that are platted,
Yeah,
but then it shows other areas where it's not platted.
yes.
Is that, how can I find out if you guys have said that's gonna be recreation?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
not.
these maps will be out there. These maps are the whole full presentation with each breakdown of each
this
piece of
exercise
property.
is not to redesignate common property.
No,
They were
no.
looking at the development, additional
Yeah,
property
properties,
acquired
yes.
from CCI.
Yeah.
So common property itself was not part of this process.
Correct, common property was not. Common property is, and you look, there's a lot of common property behind homes, and I think the goal is that's going to stay for common property. You know, the only thing that might be put in there is be like a walking trail or
Okay.
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and that's part, yeah, that's kind of the other half of my question.
Yeah.
If it's designated common property,
Hey,
it
Will, will you
will,
turn your mic on? Sorry. On the top, there's a button. Thank you.
is that on now?
I don't know. Okay, no.
There it is.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, the other half of my question, if it's designated common property, does that mean it will always be designated common property?
For the
You know,
most part,
my-
that's correct.
Yes,
Okay, well, I'm guessing common property was bordering on the parking lot for Tougaloo Beach, and now it's a dog park. And I'm not objecting, I'm just asking, was that common property that was
That was actually
redesignated?
acquired previously and not originally designated common property.
yeah.
It was not originally designated
No.
common? Okay, so if it is, it stays that way forever, you
Yes.
think?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, these maps will show, the high-level maps will show common property that
It's,
we own.
well,
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, Bob, I don't remind you of one thing. Forever is a very, very long time.
And I won't be here for all of it, but I'll be here for some of it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your team. Good job. Next?
Can I interject one thing that I forgot to mention in my update?
Yes, sir.
Is that, and part of my Public Works review already, in the truck review, I am going to reduce the number of trucks that Public Works has by 11. So those will be taken out of work and sold for money coming back into the association.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is an Asian carp update. Pat?
Okay, so this is to Rick. I'll make this quick. But first, one of the things you guys need to be thinking about, this is Rick and I's last 6-8 months on the board, and this is something that was designated to me a number of years ago when this carp thing started, and myself and Carla, then Carla left the board and it rolled to me. Somebody in the next, but before the next board meeting needs to step up and say, I'm the carp guy, right? Okay? Because there's a lot of looking, and what I did is I contacted Marty when I saw this, and I said I'd like to have a presentation in the board, And what I would like to do is to explain first that I don't have a presentation other than this. It's going to be pretty quick, but I would like for you to go to, and you might have to get this off of the video, but Google Tennessee Asian Carp Commission. Tennessee Asian Carp Commission. There's a video out there that is 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 10 seconds long. No, 10 seconds long. And it is very, very detailed, very involved, and you will probably fall asleep during it, but it's got bits and pieces of very vital information, and that's primarily what I'm going to cover for you today. Okay, so today I'll be reviewing this video as an update on Asian carp, and then more information is on the video, and again, I recommend that each of you watch it. And a large part of the video is a report by the TWRA Aquatic and Invasive Species Coordinator. His name is Mr. Cole Hardy. And please also make note that Cole Hardy will be in attendance at an HOA forum called State of the Lake to be held at the Community Church on May the 4th from 4 to 6 p.m. The flyer looks like this, and I'll read it to everybody, and you can see it on the latest telegram. If you're not signed up, please sign up. Scroll to the bottom, and it says HOA State of the Lake. The State of the Lake. Join us Thursday, May the 4th, 4 p.m. for the next Open Village meeting. Guest presenters include David Flanagan from Water, Jim Goyert from the Fishing Club, John Mansusko from the Cruising Club, Jeff Rauch from T-Bart, Cole Hardy, and John Hammonds from Region 4 Fisheries. So they will be there to present and take your questions. My report today is a very brief version of the 1 hour, 29-minute video. Much more detailed information is available. At 2 minutes and 26 seconds in the video, Mr. Hardy began to explain funding and project development, active projects, silver carp distribution, prevention and control strategy for both the Tennessee and Cumberland River system. He explains that federal funding increased from $25 million in 2020 through 2022, each of those years up $25 million. And the period of 2023 was increased federally to $32 million. He also points out that this is federal funding divided among other states that go all the way over from Iowa to up through Illinois, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. So there's a lot of states involved. And this is separate from deterrent funding, which he explains. Of note, go to the Commissioner Butler's comment at 41 minutes and 30 seconds, and I'm going to read the last part of his comment. So this is one of the commissioners made a comment that when you do this, listen to his first and then listen to the video. The active projects are larval sampling, which began in 2016 on Kentucky and Barkley reservoirs, and so far there's been no evidence of successful spawning. Upper Tennessee River surveillance, that's in our area, began in 2020. Electrofishing throughout summer, below 5 dams, and no silver carp detections. Sampling on the Upper Tennessee includes the lakes or reservoirs of Nickajack, Chickamauga, Watts Bar, Fort Loudon, and Melton Hill, which is at Oak Ridge. No detections reported by sampling or by, and at 9:46 in the video, he talked about sources including interviewing fishermen, commercial fisheries, thousands of members of the general public recreating on the Upper Tennessee, no evidence of a successful spawn since 2016, and no silver carp detections. Active projects ongoing are deterrent prioritization through structured decision-making, and they have a long, some of you may find it very interesting, I did not, but it's very important, Tennessee Carp Harvest Incentive Program, which picks up the majority of the federal funding. At 11:06, he talks about active projects and reviews, deterrent prioritization, and at 12 minutes and 10 seconds, Mr. Hardy then shows a map detailing each Tennessee Basin segment labeled with the abundance of carp in that segment, as well as the likelihood of reproduction. And of note, from Wilson Lake to Wheeler, they found no carp and no reproduction. And it's the same in the following. No carp, no reproduction from Wheeler to Guntersville, Guntersville to Nickajack, Nickajack to Chickamauga, Chickamauga to Watts Bar, Watts Bar to Fort Loudon. And at 16 minutes and 10 seconds, he talks about invasive carp in Tennessee. Federal funding has played a key role in advancing our knowledge. No evidence of successful spawning since we began larval monitoring in 2016. And populations are a result of a migration and remaining 2015 year class, which he talks about that massive spawning back in 2015 in the upper Mississippi that leaked all the way through Tennessee River and is now to Pickwick, but primarily in Kentucky and Lake Barkley. No significant upstream population advancement. These fish are not exhibiting a salmon-like run upstream, need to implement deterrence strategically, and need to continue removal efforts, which would be the commercial harvesting. A review of the commercial fishing industry at 27 minutes and 10 seconds, and again, Commissioner Butler's funding statement at 41 minutes and 30 seconds ended with, and this is what the commissioner said, and I quote, "With funds available, we receive," meaning Tennessee, "with funds available, we receive peanuts. We need to go big." And he's real big on taking a contingent group to Washington, D.C. and lobbying for more funds for these deterrent efforts. The remainder of the time is taken with speakers reviewing programmatic environmental assessment. A TV update was then given regarding funding as well as environmental assessment permitting and time frame for each. They have to go through a permitting process for endangered species, water runoff, pollution, et cetera, and he's got a time limit in the video for each of those. I highly recommend watching the video to get the full report of each speaker. And again, simply Google Tennessee Asian Carp Commission. And please attend the State of the Lake Forum to be held at the Community Church from 4 to 6 p.m. on May the 4th. And that's it. Questions, comments, or rude remarks?
So Pat, was there any discussion? I thought I heard not that long ago that they were going to start implementing some of these barriers at some of the locks. Was there any discussion around that?
Yeah, and that's why I would like for you to watch, because rather than me sit here and tell you this, you'll see in the video that at times they talk about it sounds like it's going to go real quick. Later on in the video, when they're talking about billions of dollars in funding to build these things, they're talking 2029. So the efforts that we have of protecting our lakefront properties and our recreation should not stop. When you're sitting around on that rainy day and you have nothing to do, pick up the computer, log on to the TVPOA website, go to the part about Asian carp. There's a list of blank letters in there that you can send with the addresses to the congressmen, governors, senators, whoever, to voice your opinion about this. And this has been working. It's been working not only in Tellico Village, but the surrounding communities. Loudoun County's involved in it, Blount, Monroe. Just the more voices we hear about protecting. And again, we were developed, the Tennessee Reservoir was developed for economic development, the only economic development effort made by TVA in its history to improve the economic development of Loudoun, Monroe, and Blount counties. And imagine what would happen if Asian carp came in here. So, be a little aggressive, be nice and considerate, but we don't need these carp to come here. All right?
So, Beth, can we put a link from the Asian carp portion of our website to this Tennessee property view? Or not property view, sorry, Asian Carp Commission, the one that. You did.
Okay.
I wrote a different note that I had made.
All right.
Any other questions for Pat? All right, thank you. And I take it you'll be recruiting your replacement.
Well, I'll be happy to work with him for the rest of the year. I don't want to leave him in the lurch like Carla left me. Sorry, Carla.
All right, next on the agenda is New Villagers update.
Thank you. Well, on behalf of New Villagers, thank you for inviting us for this update. There we go. Well, my name is Greg Pickens, and my wife and I moved into the Chattooga neighborhood March of last year, and we've been loving it ever since. And to coin a phrase from an old friend of mine, I'm not retired, I'm just unemployed but too busy to find a job. I'm going to quickly go through a 40,000-foot view of the New Villagers' purpose. kind of the highlights, and I'm going to concentrate on what I consider the call to action, or some of the observations that we've made. So the purpose, I call it a fire hose. Basically, we want people, new villagers, new residents coming in to meet new people as quick as they possibly can and to have fun. So basically, it's a fire hose effort of giving them as many different activities that we can identify that they could participate at their leisure. We've been averaging for the last few years about 1,300 memberships. That's a pretty significant number, about 20% of Tellico Village. We average about 200 plus events, 45 people per event, 9,000 participants. And then on top of that, we've got about 350 golf memberships that people have signed up for the 22 scramble events. And hold on to the 350 number, I'll come back to it in a minute. So we're operating pretty consistently right around 170K. I think Marty and John, I don't know as past presidents if you remember your budgets, but I think we're pretty consistent.
I don't
I
remember
think
being
we're
near that high.
just about the same.
About the same.
When I was president of New Villages, we had about 1,300. And that's the year that we went to having 2 meetings because we couldn't fit everybody in one. So when you have your monthly socials downstairs.
So are we sitting here looking at a future board member?
I'm not interviewing for a job.
We have the New Villagers president here too, and I've already been recruiting him.
Yeah,
And he-
the
and he's
job
a-
recruits you. You don't apply.
His name is Bob. His name is Bob Wolf, and he's a great president. So some of our highlights, really 3 different categories. The dining out events, social, recreational, educational, and what we call the New Villager sponsored. In addition to the New Villagers, all of the new residents can join HOA, all the different clubs, the golf program, rec center, everything. So yeah, on top of this, again, we're trying to give the new residents as many different life-enhancing experiences as they can get. So, the call to action. Some of the observations that we've made recently is that we don't have a POA table at the socials. And we really think that that would be beneficial to the POA if you had a table representing basically what I'll call the committees. The POA can actually look at the new villagers as kind of the tip of the marketing spear for the marketing arm. We represent a lot of new people coming into the village that have a lot of the same values that the older members of the village have. And the second point would be the having Chet at least do 2 presentations to our, at the socials. And we would like to work closer again with the marketing group to really facilitate defining the strategies and using us as more of a benefit. Case in point, we heard that one of the new residents was a retired law enforcement officer. Well, he convinced 6 of his other friends to come in to the village as well. And there's a number of other cases like that that would be beneficial. The Golf Revenue Challenge I picked up last month that Rick was working with the golf committee on. And as an example of how new villagers could participate with the different committees, I'll volunteer myself. In a past life, I worked for Pebble Beach for 5 years managing their driving range. And I had quite a bit of experience with the different superintendents and the head pros from the 4 different courses, and got a pretty good idea of revenue management from a Pebble Beach standpoint. And as a new villager, I'd like to volunteer coming onto the committee to help pass on some knowledge or at least work out some of the brainstorming sessions. Going back to the 350 new villagers that are committed to playing golf, I would honestly say less than half of them are signed up with any of the golf revenue opportunities. They should be a focal point and marketing focus for the golf organization as a target. And taking that one step further, many of those members have never been on a golf course before. So they're taking lessons at the driving range, but they have no idea about course etiquette. So one thing I learned at Pebble Beach was anytime they had an open hole or two holes, the instructors would be out there trying to teach people. And this would be an excellent opportunity for the professionals, the instructors, to give course management and etiquette experience to the new villagers and, frankly, the rest of the residents. So that's it in a nutshell. Any questions?
I guess not. You did a good job. Thank you so much. And we all know how important New Villagers is. That's one of the great assets to this community. So thanks for the time that you guys are putting in. It's really appreciated.
Hey, Chet, are you
Well,
a new
and-
villager?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good.
Well, and one of the things that the gentleman should do is put in his application for the Golf Advisory Committee immediately.
And the other thing is, I mean, to your point about having a table for the POA, I mean, we can certainly talk about that. I see you have Chet speaking at your meetings, and certainly any of the other board members, me included, would be happy to come and speak at your meetings too. So whatever works for you guys, just let us know. Thank you. Finance review. Mr. White.
So, in the FAC meeting this past Friday, there were a couple of suggestions that were made to help improve some of the reporting, specifically in regards to the balance sheet. There's no real comparison as to where we were 3 months ago, and so in the April report as we come out, we'll have a comparison back to the end of the year. The audit will have been completed and our numbers would be reasonably unchanged, so we can see some differences as what we've done. Because this balance sheet, while it's good, doesn't necessarily tell you what's improved and what we've had going on so far. So for the month of March, we increased our cash by $300,000, and year-to-date, it's gone up by $1.7 million. So we'll be able to show some of that information as we go through it. Nothing else too much has changed on the liability side. Again, I will point out on the long-term liabilities, we reduced it by $51,000 just through our normal monthly payments for the month of March, and $182,000 year-to-date. So there's a couple of changes that'll help hopefully provide some better information about that. This summary will outline that as well, and so we'll try to incorporate some of that as well. Oops. So overall, for the first 3 months of the year, had good numbers in almost every category. We had a few things that were down on our revenues. Golf was down by $65,000 in comparison to budget, and we'll talk about that as we get into the golf section. Recreation is up by 22, Public Works down by 77, and again, there's some comments that we'll try to make from that. And through our general ops, we're up $55,000. Comparing it to prior year, numbers are up and certainly great. So there's some questions in our budget process and how we picture the numbers and the periods that we put some of these numbers into, and we'll try to evaluate where they came from and why we did some of those adjustments. On the cost of goods sold line, we're over from budget, and I think some of that was, as you can clearly see from prior year, we're comparable, and I think we just missed something perhaps within the budget. Most of that difference is falling within the Public Works on the utility installations, and we had costs that came in the first 3 months of the year that will be used ratably throughout the year. And so there may be opportunities to pull that, put it into a prepaid until we use them, and we'll try to get some information on that as well. Salaries and benefits are in pretty good shape comparison to budget over last year, as we explained with the increases that we've made. On the total expenses, we're ahead of budget, meaning we're below our budget number by $680,000. Fairly comparable to last year, only off by $118,000. So as we looked into those numbers, there's a few areas that are worth talking about. In particular, our maintenance costs are down by $413,000. And as in the FAC, it was asked, why are we down? Are we missing some of our repair costs? Have we pushed some things? Are we just not doing them? And we found that that's not necessarily the case. A big portion of that is within the public works, and in the first quarter of '22, and they used that data to budget in for '23, they had a very high number of water leaks, and so there was a very high amount of expenditures that was budgeted in this year, which hasn't happened. They've had very few leaks, and so perhaps there's some savings there. Maybe it's just timing that we'll come back and hit to those, but we think that we've achieved some savings. It's just hard to quantify that for sure. So of that $680,000, $413 is in the maintenance, about another $99 is in our operational expenses, and $84,000 is in services. Services is our audit fees haven't been paid yet, and they'll be paid in probably April and May. They were budgeted in February, March. There's some contract work that was related to some of the repair and maintenance, and because we haven't had some of those costs in these first quarter, they've been pushed aside into the future periods as well. So overall, pretty good numbers, $404,000 ahead of our budget for the first quarter. And we had some gain and loss on some sale of lots. Interest income is improving. As our quarter end, as part of our new policy, we have some reporting that we'll provide to you at the end of this presentation in regards to our investments, and some of that is related to this interest, and we're moving some of our low-rate investments into some higher ones that are better in the market, and so we should see pickups as we go through the course of this year. The one line that is on there that's a little unusual is the reserve maintenance, and so these were items that were budgeted as part of our capital and maintenance reserve. Almost all of those items have not occurred yet, and as Chet was talking about, as we look at that schedule and what the timing is of those are, most of those will be starting to hit in April and May, and so we had budgeted them for a couple of months in February and March. So I don't think we'll achieve any savings there, but it's just a timing factor. So one of the big pushes that we have within the financial aspects is looking at our surplus or our subsidy by division. And as it rolls up, we were expecting to hit $557,000, and with all of the benefits that we saw above, we're at $1.3 million, or a total of $767,000 above the budget, about $100,000 above where we were last year. So everything's fairly positive within the financial realm. Cash is good, debts are going down, profitability within the POA is better than we had anticipated.
So that number is primarily timing, you think?
Some of it would be. Like for the leaks, we didn't have them, and so we probably are going to pick up some savings from that. Some of them are when you're trying to budget in August, where you're going to have some of these repairs and these maintenance are going to hit. You assume that you'll have some first quarter. We just have not had as much. Doesn't mean that in May that we wouldn't have an inordinate amount as it comes back around. So I think there's tentatively some savings to achieve in there, but it's hard to say yet in the first quarter. One of the other aspects that we talked about as we did the budget is that once we got a few months under our belt, and probably at the end of April, we'll try to present to you a forecast. Budget's only good, it's already 6 months out of date, and we know there's some things like these savings that we potentially have occurred, cost of sales and those types of things. So we'll come back with a separate slide that just says, given the factors that have been presented, we think that we'll end up the year with X amount of dollars, and we'll compare that back to where we were originally.
Hey, Mickey, just so we don't have to do this every time, because we've been doing this for years, having this timing discussion, shouldn't some of this, like that 250, really just be a reserve item? It's not baked into our P and L budget, so that we don't have to worry about the timing. Or if it even happens at all, like water leaks, that's a repair and maintenance reservable item.
Depends on the nature. So as we built the capital and maintenance reserve, we identified certain types of maintenance items that were just ongoing, large dollars, something that the board needed to have some visibility into and some approval for, and those were classified separately. So we, as managers, are going to be pushing everybody to operate within that net surplus or deficit from operations line. That's their target. They certainly have to look at the subsidy, but that's within their realm of management. They have control over those and trying to push back through those. These other lines, gain and loss, interest income, those are not. The reserve maintenance perhaps has some element of it and timing of it, but as right now, we don't see any change from that. Pat?
So my opinion, John, I think it needs to stay the way it is because as Chet talked before, when you have a plan and for some reason or other somebody didn't send out the bid package or whatever and it comes back late, then we've got a problem. If you budgeted for water leaks and they did not occur and you move that excess into reserve and then water leaks occur in May, it appears we're tapping a reserve account for water leaks, but it was just at the wrong time of the year.
Yeah. It's hard to predict
It's,
on
to,
some
to
of
me,
those
it's
maintenance.
to me, it's an accountability issue. You
Correct.
can hold people tighter accountable here and to reserves if they're separate and stay that way.
Correct. Apologize for the smallness of this. Next period, we'll get rid of the period and just report out the year-to-date so you can see that a little bit better. Revenues, as they come in, for the assessments, we're at 3.4 million, so pretty close to what budget and about 300,000 more than they were prior year. But given the increase in the assessment values, we would have expected some of that. Some of the permits and the fees that we have seen have been reduced. We haven't had quite as many, and so you'll see a little bit of some of the deficits on some of the others in comparison to prior years as well. We had budgeted for that, so you see a positive variance on some of our permits, but they're lower than what they were last year. This is just general ops, 3.8 million ahead. Salaries and wages, I think we're a little bit ahead on our budgets, and some of those expenses we talked about in the total were a part of what we see here, mostly maintenance. For the admin section, those fees in regards to professional fees are down and some of the operating costs as well. Golf rounds report is a topic of conversation pretty heavily right now. There are a lot of golf being played. January, February was a mild weather period, so our overall number of rounds that were paid for the first 3 months were 16,868, and we'd only budgeted 13,861. So with that increase, you would have thought that we would have seen an increase in revenue on golf, but it's just the opposite. So we did some research, and what we found is that the higher number of those additional rounds is coming from the unlimited golf, and the unlimited golf is allocated based on a percentage that was budgeted, and that's fairly low for January and February. It's about 2.5% for those periods, and the number of rounds we played was substantially higher than that. And so it's just a timing factor of what we're going to come through that, and those will turn themselves around as we go through the year. The other piece we found is that they have eliminated the number of guest rounds that are being offered to the public, and those guest rounds have a higher price point. And they're
Wait a second. They weren't eliminated, they were moved
moved
at the request of
golf
golfers
and the residents.
because they didn't want to see non-property owners in front of them.
Correct.
And during the budget process, if everybody recalls, we talked about those people are in front of you because you didn't honor that tee time, and we were filling it with outside guests at $70 a round. And now there is nobody in that tee time, and we're losing $70 a round.
Correct. So it's affecting our revenue. Again, it's It's a known factor, as requested by the membership and the residents and the board approved, and so it was a known piece of what we're doing. But in regards to the revenue that's being received, we didn't anticipate it quite as much as we had thought it would be, and so it's impacted that revenue number a little bit. Wages are in line. Cost in regards to the expenses are mostly in the maintenance side. Horticultural expenses and supplies were set in a time, a little bit of a timing difference is when they had planned and where they actually have done the work to get the fertilizers and the sands and all of the prep work out. So we'll see that come back probably in the month of April. And again, their bottom line on that surplus, they had budgeted for $797 for it to be a subsidy, and they're a little bit ahead by $14,000 so far. Memberships at the rec center have hit another all-time high, 1,376 from the household and 732 for the individual memberships. And so these increases is reflected into the revenue for the recreation department. They're ahead of budget by $22,000. Their costs are almost perfectly in line. They also have some maintenance costs that have been timing in the house. Some of the supplies have come in. They had budgeted to have received some certain expenditures, and because of some of the delays in getting the materials in, they have been pushed into April and May. Those are strictly just timing. They don't anticipate any savings from that. They'll pick up the additional revenue, but the $52,000 is strictly just a timing issue. Public Works, again, we'll carve this out and try to make it a little bit smaller so everybody can read it going forward. We have some issues within some of these numbers. To date, we are showing that we are below revenue on budget on both water and sewer services. There were some billing issues in the month of February where we had overbilled based upon some data that we had received from the meters. We had corrected that in the month of March. The overall usage of water is up by about 1 million gallons, so I would have thought that our revenue would have been up. So we're researching that and trying to figure out where we got off on that. I don't know that it's in billing yet, but it's certainly a possibility that we could pick some of that back up once we look into that and see if we can make some corrections. So they're at 1.5, which is 77,000 below on the revenue side, and we think we can identify what's happening with that and pick some of that back up. As we'd mentioned on the cost of sales and the Public Works, it's within those utility tank installations, and probably that's more of a timing. As you can see, last year, at the same time, we were at 938,000 on the cost of goods sold line with a lower margin. We budgeted for it to be a little flatter across the periods, and so it looks a little odd, but we'll take some further look down into that as well. Total expenses, again, mostly within the sewer and the water leaks that have delayed has pushed us with some positive variances on our expenses. Public safety is pretty close. Food service, we're down a little bit on the revenue year-to-date, but we were closed at Kahee for 2 weeks while we did some renovations there earlier in the year, and so it's turned around, and we've been making up some of that deficit as we've gone through it. Total expenses for the group is at 23,000 positive. Theirs is not in maintenance. They actually were a little bit high in some maintenance costs. They had some elevator expense repairs and the sprinkler system. There was about 15,000 that was hit as there, so their maintenance costs are a little higher. Theirs is more in the small wares, and some of those things have not been purchased yet, and some professional and labor costs as well. Boat revenues are pretty close, not too much unusual there. 197, a little bit below, but 19,000 over last year. One of the things that, as a process of the insurance renewal, is that within the total expenditures, the amount of insurance that's being allocated to boats is too low. The marine package is a fairly substantial number, and we'll talk about that as we get to the end of this. There's some insurance presentation we'll go through. So we'll be changing the allocation going forward, and so it may create some variance issues on that, but we'll provide that information as we get to it. TV commercial is great. It's paying for itself, 45,000 positive at a surplus line for the POA. For this period, we have two capital requests, both under the 50,000. That second one under there is a utility vehicle, and originally it was budgeted as two vehicles for 25,500. The first one came in about 5,000 below what we were budgeted. This second one, they're making a change. They're going to use this four-wheel drive utility vehicle to be the picker at Tokwa. The current vehicle doesn't have enough power to go up some of those slopes and was burning out the transmission. So they're going to convert that vehicle into maintenance use, and then they're going to use this utility vehicle and put the picker equipment on it. So there's a little bit more cost related to it, but overall, they're still within their 25,500 budget.
And just to be clear, that picker that the transmission's burning out and all that, that was provided to us as a courtesy vehicle for when we leased the carts.
I think so, yes.
Yes, so this is not something that we purchased and it was a wrong purchase. This is something that they gave us as a picker, and normally ranges are flat and ours has a big incline.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't get up the slopes. So given that both are within the $50,000 limit and both overall are in total with our budget, it's informational only. And this is the supporting information that was provided to you in regards to those. Any questions about our financials or cash requirements or funding? Now to a very interesting conversation that will probably come up in regards to our insurance. So this schedule we provided shows what our total insurance costs were in the year April of 21 through March of 22, and that was right at 400,000. There were some coverage changes and premium increases on that next year that rose up to 537,000, which was a 34% increase in the prior year. Our new policy has just been renewed, and it came in at originally, as you can see at the very bottom, the first quote that they provided us was 728,000, which was 35%, and we went back through and made some changes. TIS worked with us to try to find some alternative markets to bid out some of our policies. Originally, this was all with Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's quote was way too high at that 728,000, so we asked them to relook at keeping some of it with Selective Insurance, and some of the others we priced out with some other A-quality carriers, but we do have kind of a variety of carriers on our list now that's providing this coverage. It's all being managed through TIS, and we appreciate what they helped us with. A lot of effort, maybe not a great outcome, as we have still a 28% increase on the overall pricing on our premiums. So our property and work comp were non-renewed. We went outside of the original carriers for the work comp through a company called Propel. The premium there is up from 51 to 58, but of that, some of it is related to the additional wages that we are paying, and so 9% of that 14% is related to the increase in wages, and a 5% increase is technically what we've had in that rate. The modifier that's related to that was pretty consistent, and actually the previous carrier had a 1% add-on, just how they had billed it, so we got a little bit of a break, and with the changes in the premiums, we only had a 5% increase there.
Our experience, Mark, was actually the highest it's been since 2011.
Yeah.
And it went over 1 for the first time in 5 years.
Yeah. We had a fairly high dollar amount of claims, but there were a number of smaller claims that were presented. And so we're actively taking the perspective that we will not submit those small dollar ones without some consideration to determine whether we should just pay for those small ones and manage it. I think that will go a long way towards improving that mod rate. Assuming we don't have any major claims, we should be in a better shape going into the next year.
Have you considered going self-insured on workers' comp with stopgap policy?
We had not enough time to put anything like that in place for this policy. Certainly, we're going to look at that. And Bob put out an email with a lot of questions pertaining to that. We need to go back and look at our deductibles to see if maybe we can increase the deductibles and secure some savings that will give us a benefit there. The one piece that was probably the hardest to get placed this period was on the marine and the umbrella. The marine operations, it seems like there's just a general consensus in the market that nobody really wants to write the policies. Cincinnati was going to write it, but theirs was about double of what was shown there. They came back in and were able to find a company named Markle that did provide some of that, but they only wanted to do an umbrella coverage of $4 million. So we had to go out and find another carrier that would provide that additional $6 million in umbrella coverage. It still came in fairly reasonable for the umbrella, but the marine policies are just they're a difficult thing for us to
Yeah, they went through the roof. And what claims have we had? I can't remember any.
Not much, but the market has
Yeah, all right,
shown
no, I
some.
understand
And
that
so
part.
that's really what was driving up every carrier.
So what happened?
You were a boater. What's going on in the marine world that's driving this up?
What's happened is specifically in Tennessee, we have a lot of large lakes with a lot of large marinas that are covered. And because those covered ones are very easily affected by wind.
Sure.
And last year they had a huge amount of collapsed roofs onto boats. And so they were both paying for the boats damaged and to the marina for putting the roofs back. And that number broke their ceiling.
Yeah, so this year we pay for it.
Yeah, and this year we pay for it.
Well, that's how it works.
So, well, are there, you were talking about self-insured on workers' comp, and one of the companies I work for was self-insured in a lot of places. Is it possible to do this? That's why I asked, what claims have we had? And there's been virtually nothing.
They were, and we talked about it a little bit. The gas stocks is something that's a little bit concerning.
I think
That's
I'd
what I
leave
was
that
about to say,
alone.
is the
Yeah,
gas docks is
I
the
wouldn't
real.
touch that one.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
real liability right
No,
there.
we're talking docks that are out there on floats,
Yeah.
connected by cables. And we've had, like end dock, broke loose from a cable and floated out towards for those not familiar, the silos at Tanasi, and they had to go pull them back in.
Yeah,
No
but
big-
we didn't file an
No,
insurance
right,
claim.
no big deal. It's not even worth filing for.
Correct.
But other than that, we've had wind damage to boats, to tops. Mine's got a ripped top, and I have to replace that now. But we've had bent bimini tops, all this stuff, but those go with the boater.
Correct.
And a dock is simply gonna bang up against something, that big black float is gonna fill up with water, and typically it lists because you have 36 boats keeping it afloat as well. So I'm just curious,
Well,
that's a lot of
But
money.
they don't separate the gas dock from the rest of the docks.
That's the
insurance
problem.
coverage.
Number one, it's coverage or not.
Yeah,
And
there
the
you
second
go.
problem is that the trend, back to that whole self-insuring, the trend now, as an example, Sequoia is opening up a dock, or have a dock, but they're going to drop their insurance and force, if you're gonna have a boat there, you have to insure the dock.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of people, they're fleeing that boat like rats.
But at the same time, doubling your insurance rates over no claims is.
Yeah, we have no choice. It's just like in
I know,
Florida.
I know.
Your wind rates go up whether you had a hurricane or not, if somebody else had a hurricane.
So I have a question. Are the insurance rates, accurately reflected in the dock costs? Or are they not?
Are you asking whether the volume of the coverage is
No,
driven
what
by.
I'm asking is, when we start to talk about what it costs to run our dock operations, do we have accurate insurance rates in there? Or is the insurance not even considered?
In the P&L, the allocation of the premiums previously done was incorrect. They were allocated based upon revenues, and the marine policy was not. That's clearly all related to the docks and should be a part of that. And so
Okay,
we'll
but-
correct that in April.
So, yeah, so previously it was not.
Right,
I got it.
yes.
So are the numbers for 23, 24, ex Tanasi?
They were reduced for that,
So the costs have gone up even with Tanasi
correct.
gone, not being covered.
Yeah, property costs 87,000, we're at 171,000. And that's not including anything for Tanasi at this point.
Yeah, and the 87 included Tanasi? Yeah.
Well, 2 fires will do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Think.
So
How much we charging?
we are bound, we have coverage, we don't like it, and we do think that we need to go back and make some additional steps to improve it. And I think Bob sent out an email to everybody that I think we should talk through, because the suggestions that he made mirrored some of the conversations that we had in the FAC on Friday about trying to set up a committee that evaluates what we're currently doing, investigating with the insurance companies, what would they like to see to give them a better sense that we know what we're doing and can minimize some of our premium, our loss limitations, find out what we need to be documenting as part of that, looking at the deductibles, looking at self-insured and portions of it. The docks are a good example of that. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to look at some of that. But I think it requires a bigger effort than what we did. We had a fairly short window to get this closed, and so we worked hard and got that done and got some decreases to that. But there's still a window there.
So I think that one of the things that we need to make clear is our window is 30 days, and that's not ours. That's driven by the insurance company. And it used to be, years ago, they'd give you 60 days or 90 days. Well, now, because of how the weather affects and events affect insurance, they will only open for bidding and open for buying insurance for 30 days, and that's it. One of the other things that we talked about in this insurance is that we are now having every building that we own have a fire inspection once a quarter. And from that fire inspection, we take notes and come up with repairs that are needed. And then every quarter, we forward all those reports and fixes and notes to our insurance. And the point of this is to try and get us out of the hole of all the fires that we've had, and show that we are doing our due diligence and taking care of business, so to speak, to keep that from ever happening again.
Mick, out of curiosity, what is our deductible, say, for property?
I'd have to go back and look. I don't know that right offhand.
Because that's one way to self-insure. You have a very high deductible, so it's only
Yep.
catastrophic coverage.
Yeah, we'll go back and do some scenarios perhaps with TIS and ask them what would be the change in the premium if we went to this scenario and what the deductibles were. See if it makes enough change that would prompt us to try to call. I think doing so on the docks is probably a great idea, because our number of losses and the potential for us to have losses is pretty low.
Gas dock blows up.
You know what, and then Rick just mumbled under his breath, gas dock blows up. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
certainly a
that's,
concern.
so
That
the
would be
second question would be,
catastrophic.
then what will our umbrella cover if we go to a self-insurance?
Right, or my question, and again, you guys are the experts. So you bring an insurance agent down and you walk down the Tanasi parking lot and you say, here's our dock, will you insure this? It's not a gas dock there. Then you walk down to Tugaloo and,
They're not that stupid, sorry.
but when the
We'd
one.
like to think they are.
Yeah, but when the one at Tugaloo or the yacht club has an issue because it's got a gas dock, it does not affect the liability.
I went through that whole argument with him. I said, why, forget it, let's get rid of Tanasi. or, excuse me, the ones at the yacht club. We don't care if you do those. And they said, no, it's either all the docks, all the slips, or no slips.
Yeah.
In a conversation I had with Marsh and Associates, and they're another broker who were trying to help us and bid some of this information, they just came in too late to the game. But they came up to us afterwards and said, hey, if you want to do this, you should have a quiet period where you're not asking for quotes from insurance companies for about 6 months, and then hit it hard. Detach yourself from TIS, get them off as a broker of record, and allow other brokers to go in and do the research. And so that's kind of the plan that we'll have. We'll look in the short term about what we could do about deductibles and putting together some other ideas. Again, Bob's idea about putting together a committee with people who are of that insurance background within the community that could offer some education and some expertise to that. Formulating a plan, reaching out to try to find some better ways to give them a comfort level with us that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. I think all of those are great ideas to that.
I mean, just to follow up a little bit on what Mickey said, the last Friday at the FAC meeting, once this came up, it was a pretty lengthy discussion, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes or more.
Yep.
Especially when you look at the numbers and see that our insurance is going up about 65% in 2 years, from 400,000 to 688,000, which is a pretty big jump, even with a fire. That seems to be a pretty big jump. And the FAC committee was very, thought that we do need to be proactive in this area and look at these things like the deductibles, self-insured areas. One area that was brought up was the golf courses. We have liability, I guess, for property damage on the golf course. Really, the worst thing that can happen is somebody drives a truck out on one of the greens and does some donuts, and we got to rebuild a green for $50,000 or $100,000.
Which has happened before.
So things like that, other than that, we probably don't have much damage that can go through the golf course other than something like that. So that may be an area we could look at. The FAC felt that a committee, or an ad hoc committee, or they call it a task force, whatever you want to call it, to look into this and question, like Mickey said, that what do insurance companies look at? How do they evaluate our risks? How do they evaluate how we from proactive, preventative maintenance? The PSAC person who was there, their liaison, said there's something called the American Public Works Standard, which deals with buildings and fire hydrants and sewer, sprinkler systems and everything else. Make sure they're up to date. If you got to spend some money to bring them up to date, if it lowers our insurance costs, fine. But there are a lot of questions, how can we reduce our risks? As Chad has said before, we are not going to have another fire. We cannot afford another fire, so that cannot happen. There's got to be people in the village who work for major insurance companies, who are in risk management or risk assessment, something like that, who would be helpful on this committee. If we form this committee, that would be up to Marty, I guess, and Chet, if we're going to form this committee. We have a year, because our insurance goes from April 1 to April 1, so we just started the new policy, so we have time. And they also thought maybe we've been with TIS for a lengthy period of time, maybe we should look at some other brokers who deal with other companies. There are hundreds of insurance companies besides the ones we've been dealing with who might want to look at our business. So as I outlined in the email, is basically what FAC recommends we do, because they can't tell us what to do, obviously, but they recommended something like this, because a 65% increase in 2 years is just not acceptable.
No. So I thought we were going to bid out the brokerage contract this year. Is that true?
We looked at Marsh and Associates and Kate Russell, and to get their input. And again,
No, I mean going forward.
Yes, we're definitely going forward.
Yeah.
And in 6 months, we'll go in and we'll separate ourselves from TIS and let them and the others, Marsh and Associates, Cates and Russell, bid it out.
Well, there's more than just two out there.
They're brokers, and they're all dealing with the same major insurance companies. And so the companies, whether they go through Marsh or whether they go through TIS, they're going to quote the same package. So the bigger issue is, are you happy with the service that you're getting from TIS, and are your advocate to help you with some of these things? And I'm not sure yet about TIS. I think they gave some good efforts to it, but I think they were they were tied a little bit to that.
Yeah, we've had them for a long time, and frankly, it never hurts to change the horses once in a while.
Yep, I agree with that.
Well, the two things you guys need to keep in mind here, in all this research is, and I'll give you some very factual data to go along with this. In 2008, I was paying $40,000 for wind and liability insurance in Florida. The property I was managing did not have a claim in 2008, and that was the year of the 47 hurricanes that came into Florida. Our insurance within 5 months went to $140,000.
Yeah.
And this is where the real dance gets interesting, all of the insurance people left the state. So you were challenged to either get a state-funded insurance or the one or two insurance companies that remained, and not, if you wanted to be safe, you couldn't pick one that was a foreign-based insurance, because QBA was the insurance of choice in Florida at that time, and they're Australian. And the moment this hit, gone. Just instantly gone. And so then it became the challenge of, well, who do we choose? Yeah, we can find great rates, but if they're a foreign entity, there's a problem. And then you get into, okay, well, we accept Lloyd's of London. They're a foreign entity. And there can be arguments on both sides of that fence. So at the end of the day, yes, we have to mitigate our possibilities, but the truth is we have very little control over the costs. Very little. It's whatever the marketplace is doing and how much damage they've had to pay throughout the United States. Back in the day, if Florida had problems with hurricanes, if you lived in Minnesota, it never affected your insurance. That's not true today. If Florida has a ton of problems and they pay out all kind of money, Minnesota's insurance goes up.
Exactly.
So I just don't want to set a stage of, well, we can go out and get a whole lot better prices.
No, I know that.
Not
I understand
necessarily.
that. The insurance companies have got this game rigged.
Yes.
But by changing brokers every once in a while, you get new ideas.
No, I couldn't agree with you
Creative.
more. I could not agree. In fact, the issue of, and it's a game. You'll notice, and I don't know if any of you caught it, he's got to turn loose TIS as the broker. Well, that's actually a legal position you have to take. I'm now releasing you as my broker, because they can lock and block any other broker from bidding on your property. And so we have to get rid of them so that we can open up the door for all the others to come in and bid on it legally.
A couple of other things that
Been there, done that.
that we did to get some of these premiums reduced, and I want to make sure we brought those up, was that, and you had mentioned the tees and greens coverage that was out there. We had previously had 2.6 million on those tees and greens. And so when we evaluated what's the likelihood that you're going to lose, you're not going to lose all of the greens, probably might lose one, and none of it even covered flood damage. It was strictly just, like you said, a truck driving out in the middle of a green. So we reduced that coverage from 2.6 million down to $500,000, because the likelihood of that happening on any more than one or two greens at a time is pretty minimal. So we took that down as a savings for us. It saved us about $20,000. There was on the equipment side, they had two types of coverage. One was specified equipment, and that's the list that we provide them of all the major equipment. And then they had another non-specified that would have covered everything else, and that was also up at 2.2 million in coverage. Well, there's no way we have 2 million of unspecified equipment. We're very specific about what we have given them, and it's going to be covered. So we took that down to $500,000, and that saved us about $18,000 in our property coverage as well. We cleaned up the number of vehicles so that the schedules that Chet and Russell and I were working on went down to 57, and that saved us some additional on the vehicle coverage. So there were some things that went from that 728 to 696 and ultimately to that 688,000. But we're certainly open to a lot of additional ideas as we get through that. Any other questions?
So I assume that you're going to pursue the task force approach?
Assuming the board would recommend that, but I think we should do it irrespective. And I know that there are limitations in my knowledge base, And there's clearly some really smart people that have an insurance background within the POA that we could draw some good information on.
Well, I don't know that that requires any particular board action other than go for it.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we'll pursue that. We'll outlay or lay out a plan as to what we want to do and communicate that back to the board so you know what we're doing.
Again, the recommendation was, members from different groups, the POA, the management, FAC, PSAC, PSAC, Public Works, the fire department, whoever's on this group, plus the residents we can find who are willing to help us. Doesn't have to be a large committee, but at least we have some different views
Yep.
and different areas of expertise. To hopefully save us some money in the future.
Yeah. And even if we didn't get a member from all of those groups, we're still going to go to them and research information and get them to provide some help and assistance on those. Yes.
So Bob, are you volunteering to help coordinate that committee?
I'll work with Mickey on that. I will volunteer, so it gets me out of the Carp job.
All right, thank you.
That's the way it works.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
So one
You're up.
crowd. My name is Joel Reed. I'm a Tellico Village resident for about 9 years. Sounds pretty good, what you guys are talking about. Great. I mean it sincerely. A lot of great dialogue about things to do to control costs. It's hard to read the numbers. So did I get it right? In 2 years, insurance premiums have gone up 55%? Is that the number, or 65?
It's going from 400,000
To 688.
to 688.
So the annual impact or the dollar amount is how much more are we paying?
$288,000
Okay.
more than we paid 2 years ago.
Really good dialogue and a lot of good stuff. But I'm going to come back to labor, salary and labor. So in that same 2-year period, it's gone up 36.8%. So we're insurance, and there's a lot of great dialogue talking about $200,000, which is great. But Chet, I hear you saying that it's kind of a game. It's a difficult uphill battle because you're dealing with an outside entities, right? But internally, here at Tellico Village, we're spending over $2.1 million more in salary and wages in just 2 years' time, and I don't hear hardly anything being discussed. So I went to the Finance Committee meeting, and I asked, I said, how did you justify adding 46 new bodies? That's a 20% increase in headcount. What labor efficiency standards, what justification did you use to add those bodies? They said, what labor standards? So how do you improve headcount? How do you improve salaries? When I did the math, and Mickey, I asked you, I said, what was the breakout? The best I could do by taking the positions they're in, taking the average salary, of that 36.8% or 2.1 million, 800,000 of it was the additional headcount. So does that mean that the salary and wages went up 23.8% in 2 years? That's almost 12% a year. Unless everybody was promoted, who gets double-digit rate increases? And then I hear we're going to have a committee to go into the insurance. I'd rather a committee to go into the labor, the salary and wages. That is the 600-pound elephant in the room, in my opinion. That's where the big money is. It's something we control, too. We don't have to go to any outside entities.
I don't disagree with you. In fact, either I wasn't clear enough or I was too subtle. That's the whole point of me starting at Public Works, is I want to know why we are where we are. And I can't know unless I'm there in the middle of it to understand who does what and why. Now, I know that between last year and this year, we have increased different projects that need more bodies. So that's fine, but if I've got all these other projects going on, do they need 3 or can it be done by 1? Do they need 7 or can it be done by 2? So those are all the things that I'm looking at, because I don't disagree with you at all in terms of I have to be able to justify why I have X number of people in any one of my departments. Doesn't matter. But since Public Works is the big elephant, as you say, that's where I'm starting.
Salary and wages is the big elephant, I'm sorry. But I do like when you said about the Public Works, it didn't fall on deaf ears. Trust me, I'm sitting back there because, as I told you before, how could you increase their salary? I know you had a 68% turnover, but without even knowing what the issue was, you threw a 46% increase. You went from $15 an hour to $22 an hour, and you increased the headcount, how many, 6, 7 bodies? You don't do both. Let me finish.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
I ran the plan here in Honda, here in Loudon, so I'm very familiar with the local labor market. If you got a high turnover, you got to look at what the root cause is. If it is salary and wages, then increase it. If it's, you know,
That's-
turnover because you're
that's
not
what we
paying
did.
enough, you add more bodies to take care of the attrition. But we did both. And with a $2.1 million or 36.8% increase in salary and wages in 2 years, we got a problem. In my years and years of experience as an industrial engineer and plant manager. So I just like to hear this kind of synergy taking place to address salary and wages. If you would like my help, I took this whole building and took the 2 labor groups and put them from a cost plus agreement to a cost per piece unit. So they got skin in the game and they start controlling their head count.
Well, I'm recruiting board members. I'm on the nominating committee. Come talk to me.
Okay. So,
Phone number's in the book, and you've also
and
got to.
Mickey, I've reached out to you a couple of times, right? So you
Yeah.
let me know if you want me to come in and spend some time with you. I'd love to.
And
Okay, well, so-
having been a plant manager and an industrial engineer in my career as well, and let me address this. So we have all of these technicians that we were, and I think we discussed it before, that we had pulled in, recruited, trained, got their certifications, and then the area utility companies recruited us away because we were paying $16 an hour, and we then went up to 22. You also got to keep in mind, having been an industrial engineer as well, and having to work through Christmas seasons and major fluctuations in employees.
I worked for UPS for 6 years myself, so I
Right,
understand. Go ahead.
so you understand. So that other issue is that when I moved in here, there was about 4,200 people 15 years ago. And just in the last 3 years, we've had such a massive growth. We've never seen this before. That made a major impact on roads, sewer, water, all of these issues. So if you look at one without looking at the other, you're a bunch of idiots. But there's a happy median in there that you got to look at the whole picture. And as John said, as he said, I've said, as he talked about today, Chet talked about today, there is an issue where there is a starting point. You can either laser in on your big cost and go down from there, or you can just shoot a broad effort and go on forever. And we're challenging him to start with Public Works.
That's a good one, but I tell you right now, and the Japanese taught me this very well, you don't approve headcount. I mean, you have to give a pint of blood to even think about adding headcount. We added 20%, 46 bodies.
I know. And I did that the last year I worked for United Parcel Service, and the regional guy came in from industrial engineering and finance, and they told me I was so successful last year, which we were the #1 distribution center in the country, and they said, you cannot increase this and headcount, so we refused to let you have headcount, and I had 18 trailer loads of missed packages a day. I don't buy it all. There's a
so-
combination of everything.
Great comment. So what have you done in the board here to do what you just said?
I don't think we have the time today.
Headcount?
Give me a call. My number's in the book.
Okay.
I'll be happy to go over it with you.
Okay.
In fact, let's go to lunch. It's gonna take hours.
I'd
I
love
got
to.
a list.
Yeah.
Well, I can address part of that. What the board did is hired Chet. And we told Chet, this is an operations issue, and you have to deal with it and come back to us with your solutions.
Okay.
Yeah, no pressure. But,
Yeah.
but no, and again.
I'll help you. If you want some help from somebody, I'll be more than happy to
Here's
help.
where I'm at. I gotta discover the problem. Once I discover the problem, then I'm gonna come to guys like you and say, okay, here's what I'm finding. What am I missing?
Right.
Because I'll be the first to admit, now, guys, I've run departments like this before. So this is not my first rodeo, but there are nuances to this community that are entirely unique. And therefore, I have to discover, okay, why do we have 47 people doing a job? Do we really need that, or are we just not managing them correctly? And, and I'll be the first to admit, my initial contemplation is the latter. We're not managing them correctly. But but I have to prove that. I can't just walk in 6 months and say, I know everything, because I don't.
I would highly recommend the question is, how do you measure somebody's efficiency?
Sure.
That'd be the first question I'd ask any one of your department managers is, how do you measure efficiency? And let them explain. Okay. Thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it. I was sincere about what you're doing with the insurance. I think that's great. I just like to see that same level of enthusiasm towards salary and wages, because that's a much bigger number.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment that I thank you for the research. I mean, I've done it too, and just talked to Chet earlier today about it. We've been on a hiring spree for more than 2 years. So if I go back to the beginning of 2020, we've actually added 70 headcount in the 3 years. Well, 20, 21, and 22. 70 headcount. If you take it down to a full-time equivalent, because some of those are part-time. It's actually 43 heads, that's 30% increase in heads, full-time heads in those 3 years. And our cost of wages and benefits has gone from 39% of revenue to over 50% of revenue. So it's a huge, I mean, it's our number one expense by a multiple of anything. And we can, spend a lot of resources trying to get at $50,000 deduction in insurance. But when you're spending over $10 million in payroll, that's a big number.
Well, and I'll just piggyback on what Rick said. I mean, that was one of the top criteria when we hired Chet. Bring a new view into here, look at how we're doing things, does it make sense? Look at our processes, look at the people that we have, the numbers of people, and be sure that we're right-sized. So it's a big deal. It's not falling on deaf ears, and it's been a priority for this board for quite some time, and now we've got Chet here to really take a hard look at it and to move the needle.
Can I just ask one more thing, Chet?
Sure.
This is just a suggestion, and I've seen this done before. In the absence of efficiency standards, the first thing you do is you ask every department to start cutting headcount until they work 5% overtime. It's not what the kind of environment you want to create necessarily, but if you're bleeding profusely, make people don't, and you don't have to necessarily cut headcount. You just don't replace anybody. As attrition happens, don't do it until they're working 5% overtime. That way, you're not kicking anybody out of their family. You're not making somebody not be able to, pay for meals. You do it a very human way, but you say nobody gets to replace headcount until they start working 5% overtime. You'll find out.
Sure, and I appreciate that, and I think that my little foray into the trucks is a perfect example of how we're gonna have to chase this. I just asked the simple question, how many trucks do we have? And then from there, went all the way down to, we needed a new policy to manage our assets that we never had, or we had pieces of it, but we needed to put it together so it flowed.
Right.
So I anticipate there's gonna be more.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
In the interim, could we have until you get through with this, because I applaud your effort to try to dig into this, it's tough, have a hiring freeze? I mean, we hired 8 last month, 11 the month before. Can we just pause until we get through the review?
Uh,
I mean, we're already
Please,
over
no
budget.
knee-jerk reactions, please.
Yeah.
You go about what you need to do, but if you start making a knee-jerk reaction, something is gonna suffer somewhere, and I don't want anybody to flush a toilet, it backs up, and you don't have that guy because you did a hiring freeze.
Well, and
No, research it first before we react.
as a community, we depend on service from the POA, and it takes people to deliver service that everybody in this room asks for.
Right, and I need to be clear about something that we all kind of get wrapped up in, and I understand why we do. I'm not making light of it. We're not a engineering and production community or business. Now, it doesn't mean that I can't apply many of those same principles to how we manage it, but we aren't. We're a service industry. We're not a whole heck of a lot different than a restaurant or any other kind of service industry where people are involved and their job is to serve other people. And so that has to temper what we do. And to your point, Pat, is I don't want to start a little thing and then cause a house riot. But at the end of the day, we are going to have to make hard decisions is where I'm coming from.
Sure you are.
We are going to have to say, yeah, that's got to go. But I agree with, if we start losing people, then we don't rehire until we get that. And the 5% overtime, I'm okay with it to a point. But when we start getting into a lot of overtime, there's going to be a group of people who are loving it, and there's going to be a group of people who are really pissed off they're having to work overtime. And so we've got to try and find that balance. But I just want to throw that out there for everybody's consideration. We're not a car company. We're not a gotta have it by today delivery company. We're a service company.
And my expectation of you is anytime there's an opening in the organization, that you evaluate whether you replace it. That's your job.
Reality is, 2 years ago, you drive down to I-75 on Lenore City, and there were signs out there that said Wendy's, Burger King, all these places workers needed $12 an hour. And minimum wage in Tennessee is a little over 12. And now they're recruiting them off the street for $16 an hour. Used to be the businesses and the government controlled, because we always had these arguments during the election, minimum wage needs to increase. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. I'm not taking a side. But now the worker is controlling it.
Bob Denny, just to help me out, what's the approval process for increasing headcount? Does a department head just decide, hey, I need another guy, and he goes and hires them? Does it,
That's discussed in the budget. And so there's a budgeted amount. What I expect of Chet is that anytime there's an opening is that he says, do I really need it?
okay, thanks.
Yeah, all the hires, and there's a bit of an issue right now. All these hires are theoretically ending up on my desk, unless they're within the budget, unless we've already discussed it, hey, I'm hiring this person because. Then that's a different story. But if somebody leaves, then there's the discussion of, really, do we need to plug that hole or not?
Okay. We are to,
One last thing.
all right.
As part of the investment policy, and again, apologize for the smallness of the screen, we put the investment policy before the board, and they've approved it, and included in that was a quarterly report that we need to provide to the board each period. Everything that we currently have investments in is less than a 2-year window. So the investment policy as to what year and what investment it could be in is kind of out the door. But I wanted to present a quick overview of where we were and what the funds were invested in and the rates that we were generating and when they're coming up for renewal and coming out and will be available in cash. So we have a single account we're calling it our reserve disbursement account, and it's going to hold about $1 million. It's currently earning over 4%. It was 4% at the time of this schedule, so it's still got some good earning values to that. We have some investment in the corporate fixed incomes. Those last 4 were actually purchased at a discount of about $50,000 less, so their effective rate is closer to that 4.5%. Some of the others on the government securities and the CDs, you can see there are some low rates that were on there. They'll be coming out, some of them in short term in the next quarter or two, and then we'll be reinvesting those back in that 4.5% market, whatever is available for us at that time. So we're through this schedule. We have some at some fairly low rates that are coming out in Q1 of 2024. And we're trying to evaluate whether we should leave them in those funds or make the change, take the hit, and put them in that higher rate right now. So of the $17 million, we have $4.3 million in a money market account, and that, with the disbursements, means that right now, at any point in time, we've got $5 million that we could spend at a moment's notice. We wouldn't have to do anything from pulling from any of the CDs or investments that we have from that. We get to see about where we're going to have for some of these rolling numbers. We're going to try to even this out a little bit so we have more even amount coming out in future periods. So the goal will be, with this laddering effect, at any point in time, you've got a couple of $1 million within the next 6-month period that we'd have available if we needed it. And especially as we get ready to talk about rebuilding Tanasi, some of these funds may be needed for that, and so we want to keep a good rotation of those funds in a fairly short-term period. So there'll be some additional reporting that will come out as we get farther into our investments in the markets, get a little better and a little bit more confidence into some longer term. But right now, we're keeping everything within a 2-year framework.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mickey? All right, thanks, Mickey. That takes us to other. Do we have any others from the board? Cap looks like he's ready to have another.
When you get done with the board.
Go for it.
I was at home watching, and I submitted a couple questions and Beth answered. My concern was when Mickey, or Chet, talked about architects and we're from 4 down to 3. And what I asked was, is this for, i.e., building level plans, or was this for options? She came back basically and said both. My concern is, and if I'm out in left field, please correct me, because I was gone in February, so I don't know everything that might have been presented in open meetings. But I know we had considered two options. One was just rebuild where we are at Tanasi. The other was the restaurant at Tanasi and the golf moved over where the potential driving range is. I have been through 2, maybe even 3 studies of the parking issue. I have also been directly involved with the abutters across the cove when they had an issue with the lighting in the parking lot because it was so much lighting there, and Jeff Gagley worked with them, came up with new lighting fixtures, which changed the direction of the flow or of the light. We also changed how much of that parking lot was lit, so we only lit for security reasons the clubhouse itself and not the entire rest of the parking lot. My concern when I heard this, i.e. we're at the point now with architects and maybe even building permits, my concern is basically you've got a bunch of abutters across that cove that look down on that facility. If you get into now, yes, and I've heard Chet say he's had on the back of an envelope from a resident that he can put 400 cars on that piece of property. My concern is it's going to be a Walmart-type parking lot. That's going to be asphalt from one complete side to the other. Just give me a minute, please. Chet.
I'm resting.
And whereas if, God gave us an option, not that we wanted it, but we had it, to maybe address the whole parking issue there with a restaurant, with docks, and then put the golf aside. I heard some people say, oh no, the golfers want to be able to go to the restaurant. My experience back when I was playing golf is you get done with a round, you'd go in, you'd order a couple of pitchers of beer, you'd settle up the bets, and then generally all go home. Very few do you stick around to have a meal. You could have a pub and you could have it down at the other location and not wind up with a Walmart-type parking lot there with 400 cars on it. I am just concerned because it's being done not in secret per se, because you've got a good cross-mix of people that are on that committee. I know that you just added a finance committee member. To me, I would have had the finance committee guy sort of on the front end to say, hey, here's a couple options and how do they cost out to see where do we get the most bang for our buck. But I'm just concerned that without any open meetings and everything, this train's going to be so far down the track that it's going to be impossible to say, whoa, and meanwhile you've got all these poor abutters that are going to be looking out at the Walmart parking lot. That's my concern. And I took the time to come over here because I wasn't able to get anything answered on the
Were you at the HOA meeting when I talked about the different options we had?
I don't think I might have been at that one.
Because I showed
was out
all
of
the
town
different.
all February. So.
I talked exactly and explicitly about this concern. And so I'll do it again, just for your benefit. And that is, we're not going to build a Walmart parking lot, and for all the reasons you just said, we have people who are in their 80s. They're not going to walk 200 yards from the far end of the parking lot to the restaurant. It's just not going to happen. And so therefore, we have to look at where we put the building versus the parking area so that nobody has a certain distance to walk to it. One of the challenges is that we're going to have 380 slips there, period, 380 parking spaces. So if that's the case, we can't just say we're going to have people parking almost past the new shack where they're the starter shack there. We're not parking way out there. We're going to have to design this thing where parking is more adequate to that. So not only have we not lost sight of that, we are directly developing around that theory, that we have to have parking that's available for everybody and in a way that our elderly have an ability to that, and that we try and cover all the people who want to park there. Frankly, my wife is not elderly, and if I told her she had to walk 200 yards to the restaurant, I'd be dropping her off in front, just letting you know. So yeah, been there, done that. So at the end of the day, we are already on that. We were on that when we started. That was one of the very first things that we talked about, is it can't be a Walmart parking lot. The second thing we talked about is that any parking lot we build must meet the blue book. I'm going to get the right colors of these things. I got it backwards again. Red book. Jesus, Chad. Anyway, the red book that explicitly defines that we have to cover all parking areas with plantings so that they do not have people's headlights as they park in that parking lot coming through everybody's window on the other side of the code, which is a direct complaint that they gave. So all of those things we are looking at in detail. Further, once we get the drawings to a point where we can present them to the community, we will. And they will have the opportunity to advise us on their thoughts on the parking lot and how the building is sitting and where it's sitting and how that's laid out. So nothing will be done in a vacuum. In fact, it will be done in steps. We're not going to have the entire thing done and then bring it out to you and say, hey, guess what you got? We're going to get 30% of it drawn up, take a look at it, see what our ideas are, see if it works. Then we'll get 60% of it drawn up and more detail filled in, see if it works. Then we'll do 90%, see if it works. And if it does, then we'll go out and get contractors to bid on it. But there's a step in every process of this, and I don't want you to think that somehow I forgot that. I haven't. It's been right at the forefront.
May I then ask, and this sounds very, very good, and I appreciate that. My concern then is, have we considered the 2I option, i.e. Something down by where the driving range is going to be located and the restaurant, or is that been killed completely and now you're back to?
So,
No, let me clarify first, because you just said something that's on videotape. You said where the driving range is going to be located. There is no plan for a driving range at this point.
But it's on the plans.
No, it's not. No, we haven't discussed where driving, we sent out a survey, correct?
that's correct.
And the 3 parts of the survey was, don't replace it,
Yep.
build it back a little bigger and a little better.
No. First one was don't replace it. Second one was building it back exactly like it was.
Yeah, that's right.
Third one was building it back there and a golf course shack at the other area down
Right.
where their maintenance is for the
Right.
carts.
Yeah.
And the last one was to put it back only much larger and bigger in the same spot, including golf and the restaurant.
Right.
And that
then-
was the one that everybody chose in the survey.
And then doing the one across the street, even if, and again, you mentioned Jeff Gagley, parking lot, et cetera. Put and don't believe anything I say. Tomorrow, go up to Tanasi at 10:30 to noon tomorrow and park in the parking lot. Find me a parking spot. They're all golfers. No restaurant, no boat, no nothing. There's no parking lots over there. Correct, guys? I'm looking at the Greens guy sitting back there. And I think Casey's either there or gone. There he is. So there are no parking lots because they're all taken up by golfers.
I
So
know.
now you have to consider, if you put it back over there, you have to incorporate the people that are going to go to the restaurant and the boaters and the people that want to play cards. So again, back to Jeff Gagley. You remember, because I remember the number, and I know you do. We've discussed it. How much would it cost to put in a 127 space parking lot? You remember the number?
Yeah,
500,000, right?
yep.
Now go over there and put a parking lot in and add a road and add water, sewer, lines, curbing, grade it, put in a house or whatever, and put the little bunkers in. Now you're almost up to $1 million. And we're not in a position to do that now. It's not even close to the budget.
All I'm saying is it's, and I again don't know the exact numbers, and I will agree to that. I've heard 22,000 square feet. My understanding in Loudoun County is you're going to be required a certain number of parking spaces depending upon the size of the building.
We have not
So
sent
by
anything to an architect yet, Cap.
I'm sorry?
He's talking about sending it out to the architect now. We have not come up with it. You said 22,000.
This
And
is
I'm
all,
doing-
yeah,
I'm
that's all
doing is
speculation.
correcting- I'm just correcting because this is videotaped. It becomes gospel tomorrow. Cap Purvis stood up there and said it's 22,000. It's not. We don't know.
I said I don't know. I said that.
So, to be clear.
All I'm saying is,
and-
please, and it sounds like you're already doing that.
Yeah.
Consider the abutters that are going to have to look down at it. You're talking about the elderly, of which I am one, walking that far to the restaurant. You know, you got X 1,000 square feet available. And I don't give a darn whether you get an architect from wherever, they can't improve upon that size. That's what they got to work with. And they're gonna have to try and be very creative to bend it around or whatever, so you've got proximity just to a restaurant, and yet fit all of those 386 or whatever you just said, parking spaces on that clearly defined piece of property. All I'm saying is by sticking with one location, you've in essence sort of tried to cram that amount of stuff into a 5-pound bucket. So that's all I'm asking. When you go to the architect, please, because I know how we did Tokwa. I was part of that whole process, and it seemed to have worked out fairly well, and people seem to be happy with it. But part of that whole process, we made sure that we expanded the parking. We showed where it was going to be. We showed how we were going to address it in the future. And subsequently we did, first with gravel, then with asphalt. And that's worked out fairly well. But there we had the ability with that old Cooper lot to expand it out to where it expanded into. Here, you don't have any other expandable area that's there. Thank you.
Any others?
Got to be quick. Mitzi, you had another.
Oh, okay, Bob Denny, mine's quick. I've heard discussion about changes to the AWE contract. Would anybody care to mention what those changes are? Or did I hear in error?
You're up, Mitzi.
I don't know what you heard. We recently re-signed the agreement for AWE. I think I mentioned that at the last board meeting. That goes through the end of this year, through December. And that was to increase utilities that were more reflective upon what the actuals are based on the LUB invoices, and also increase the monthly rent for here and at Tokwa. But what we have done recently, what we just completed was submitted an RFP out on April 1st to 7 different potential candidates for operations to run the food service. We have actually got a pre-bid meeting set up for the 25th, which is next week. We have received confirmation from one of the 7 that they will not be attending and will not be submitting a bid. But we feel pretty confident that the other folks will be submitting bids. And so between now and June the 15th, we will let them schedule facility walkthroughs. They have to do that by appointment. They can't just show up at any of the restaurants. They need to be with a staff member. Right now, we've got our new purchasing manager, Jeff DeGula, on this project, so he will work with them through emails and questions that they may have. If he can't answer them, he may come to me or come to Chet. And then they can submit questions all the way through June the 20th. And then our anticipated date for all of these proposals back will be on 7/20. And we will do something very similar to what the Tanasi committee has done, is create a food subcommittee to review the agreement or the RFPs and kind of start figuring out how we want to write up a new agreement. And, you know, pretty much that's where we are right now. The biggest thing is getting them in here and letting them see the facilities and understand how our food service operations currently work. We didn't give them any numbers as far as anything other than participants and head counts. We want them to be creative and come back with some ideas that they may have, whether it be a profit sharing or a lease agreement. But we're going to leave that up to those bidders to come back with something to us. So, you're welcome.
Anything else? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? We're adjourned. Thank you.